G'day, my name's Hayley, and today I'm actually going to be talking to you about food wastage and the detrimental effects that it has on our society, and not only that, our environment on a global and a local scale. So let's get right into the video. So what is food wastage and where is it most prevalent? So food waste is actually the loss of discarded or uneaten food. This can occur on a global scale or a local scale, as I said before. This can also occur at any stage of the food supply chain. These include production, processing, retailing, and consumption. So each stage actually has some effect to the loss of food and causes food waste. Do you know that 1/3 of the world's food is actually wasted each year? This means that $1.3 billion is lost of food. This could be resourced in many other ways. Food loss doesn't only mean a loss of food. It actually also includes vital environmental sources that we need to grow our food. These include land, water, energy, and inputs. These actually really affect our greenhouse gas emissions and also impact global warming. On a really major scale, it's seen in the food production process. An example of this is bananas being thrown off of a food truck by accident. This is obviously not on purpose, but it actually really does affect the environment, because that means that once the bananas fall off of the truck, they are no longer cosmetically selected by the supermarkets and sold, and they're just thrown in the bin. This really does affect global warming and food waste on a global scale. We also see households really wasting our food. It's just a wasteful thinking. You finish your food, you throw it in the bin. Time for a food fact. Do you know that every year, household Americans waste 222 million tons of food, which equates to almost the same amount of food produced by sub-Saharan Africa, which is 230 million tons. Fact number 2. Did you know that household Australians actually discard 20% of that shopping? That's 1 out of 5 bags. What? How and why are businesses throughout the world wasting food? The majority of our food waste actually occurring in the farming process, which is the producing sector of the supply chain. Farmers are actually wasting food on accident and because they actually incidentally want to. And in other places, we see that they're losing food because of cosmetic selection. Now, what is cosmetic selection, you ask? Cosmetic selection is when a major brand actually cosmetically selects food. For example, Coles might find a load of apples that have just come into their store, and they will only actually take 90% of it, because the other 10%, even though coming from the farmers checked, might be cosmetically selected and might have a black dot on it that won't be applicable to eat. With small businesses, we see that they overbuy food because they want to actually keep up with their demand. Chibo might order 10 kilos of coffee beans for the week. They might only need 8 kilograms. That means a loss of 2 kilograms. If you see this each week of overbuying, we see that over a month, it's 8 kilograms of coffee beans. That doesn't only mean they lose money, it means that they lose food. And food waste means that food is just being chucked out, and that actually increases greenhouse gas emissions and also global warming. When we see a consumer's point of view, we see that marketing plays a major role. We see that sales, for example, 2 for $5, increase the likelihood of the consumer buying the product. This is positive, but on the other hand, when a consumer sees a sale, they don't see what they will need for the week, they see what they want for the week. And they will probably only end up eating 70% of their food, which means they've wasted another 30% of their overall food for the week. How do you say have they wasted 30% of their food? Well, I'll tell you. If they've bought 2 punnets of strawberries, they'll only eat for the week, an average household, 1.5 punnets of strawberries. You're left with another half punnet of strawberries. A family will look at it and say, well, we'll keep it for another week. But another week goes on, and then the strawberries go off. This leads to the food being chucked out and therefore causes, what do we say, guys? Food waste. We see that not only producers but businesses and consumers are actually thinking in a vain way. They look at the looks of the product rather than how it actually will benefit them and what they need for the week, because marketing affects this in a large way. When you make a food look like you need a lot of it, people are gonna buy a lot of it. But little does the customer know, they're wasting their money and their food. So this also affects the economy. Ugh, so many effects just from food waste. What are the impacts of food waste on our businesses, economies, and environment? The copious amount of forgotten and discarded food that is tossed mindlessly into our landfills is a global travesty of massive proportion. How was the delivery? Was it good? Alright, getting back to the topic. That was actually a quote from The Consequences Food Waste by the writer called Kira K. Payne. And I thought it would really project what the answer to this question was. Because there are so many effects from food waste on a global scale that we actually can't talk about in one sentence. So I'm just going to tell you about a couple. The World Bank actually estimated that between 2009 and 2030, our population is going to grow by 50%. This is the process. The higher the population, the higher surplus in food production. And that means what? Food waste! Because the more food we have, the more food waste we have. And we are just destroying our planet with waste at a time because we aren't utilizing our food properly. So how is it affecting our society? It really hasn't affected our developed societies as of yet, but it has affected our developing societies. We see that it's affected our developing societies because they're not actually getting the food that they need, because we are taking so much of it. And that excess food waste that we have, instead of giving it to those countries, we're throwing away. Like the fact I told you before. America's throwing away just as much food as the sub-Saharan Africa is producing. Imagine that. That's so much food waste going nowhere, going into our greenhouse gases, increasing global warming. Societies are being affected in such a major way that developing countries can't develop. Currently in developed countries, we aren't experiencing major problems because we have this major surplus of food. Producers are overproducing and there's nowhere for the food to go. In approximately 25 years, we're going to see that our food surplus is actually going to decrease. If our high population increases and our food production decreases, we're actually going to become developing countries. How does it affect businesses, you say? Well, really, businesses are losing money. Because they're overbuying, they're losing their money. And this is actually negative, but for the consumer, it's positive. How is it damaging the environment? As I've said about 10 times here, global warming. We are increasing our greenhouse gas emissions by 10% each year. Global warming goes up, our food production goes down. Our world will no longer have the stamina to produce the amount of food for the amount of copious people that are growing each year. Our world is actually struggling to sustain our 7 billion people on this earth, which is predicted to raise to 9 billion people by 2050. The FAO actually declared that by 2050 we will not be able to sustain our 9 billion people, and we will be affecting our greenhouse gas emissions really detrimentally. If 16,000 kilograms of cows are used to make hamburgers just in Adelaide in 1 month, how many cows will be killed? Hundreds of cows will be killed. Think about the resulting gas emissions from the cows' remains, which are just thrown out. Tons and tons of waste. Time for a food fact. The biggest wasters of food are young adults between the ages of 18 and 24, households with incomes over $100,000, and families with children. How can food wastage be sustainably reduced and food security be achieved so we can reduce global warming? In a global scale, we want stakeholders in mass production companies to increase the awareness of food waste and how it can actually be sustainably reduced. Because if we have an increased amount of people knowing this issue, we can have an increased amount of people resolving this issue. We want to hit all areas of the food supply chain. These include governments, research institutions, producers, distributors, retailers, and most importantly, consumers. Again, on a global scale, we want to see collaboration and coordination from each and every one of our global institutions which actually reduces food waste. These include OzHarvest, Meals on Wheels, and several other really important sectors that can actually improve the way in which food is sustained. We want there to be policies and strategies to be enforced in the law, because if there are certain policies that stores have to have all organic and have to have 100% honesty with their food producers and their consumers, then you can't go wrong, because they won't be allowed to actually put back food that doesn't look good for the consumer. We want there to be donations to support these programs. And of course, finally, one of the most obvious ways in which we can reduce food waste is in our houses. If you have a loaf of bread, make it into breadcrumbs. If you've got an orange peel left over from the orange, make it into orange zest and put it into a cake. Anything that you can do, take part in it and actually save the amount of food that is going into our greenhouse gas emissions and causing global warming. Boo! Lastly, I actually want to read out a list to you of the top 10 wasted foods in our households, because consumers, you need to know this if you're going to actually start to affect food waste and start to improve the amount of waste which is going into our greenhouse gas emissions. These are bread, milk, cheese, bananas, chicken, rice, eggs, lettuce, tomatoes, and carrots. And if you want any recipes to actually review and source these unwanted foods in our households, you can actually head over to the website of Foodwise. Time for a food fact! The average Australian household actually wastes $1,036 per month on food waste. This is enough to feed the average household for a month and also pay your bills for 6 months of the year. All of the food that's wasted in Australia can fill 450,000 garbage trucks, all stacked together, and if placed end to end, could bridge the gap between Australia and New Zealand 3 times. Food waste will be stopped if we use our knowledge, collaboration, program development, investment, and think when we're in our houses. And remember, when you're eating each of your Brussels sprouts, don't leave one on this plate. Eat everything, because one on the plate leads to one big mistake for our world and for us. So, thank you for listening, Miss Saint.